I am continuing in my reading. What I'm doing in this series is to read through the entire standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This consists of the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. I am continuing reading in a chronological order, according to event, not according to publication or volume. So I'm skipping around a bit as I move along. So we've been reading about the birth of Christ. Luke chapter 1 was the Annunciations and the birth of John the Baptist, the angel appearing to Zacharias and then later to Mary. We also read in Matthew chapter 1 the Annunciation to Joseph about the birth of Christ. We then read some things happening among the Nephites during this year preceding the birth of Christ. Then we had the birth of Christ, the shepherds and the angels, read about what was going on among the Nephites, how some started to teach, after the sign was given, some started to teach that the law of Moses was done away. Of course, we had Christ being circumcised and being brought into the temple with Simeon and Anna prophesying, the visit of the wise men in Matthew chapter 2, the flight into Egypt, and their return to Nazareth. We've read all of that. Now, that actually takes us up to about the 6th or 7th year of Christ's life. So we're going to go back now to 3rd Nephi and read a little bit more about these early years after Christ's birth. And we've been reading off and on in chapter 1. Now we're going to finish 3rd Nephi chapter 1. We're picking it up in verse 27. And it came to pass that the 93rd year did also pass away in peace, save it were for the Gadianton Robbers, who dwelt upon the mountains, who did infest the land, for so strong were their holds and their secret places that the people could not overpower them. Therefore they did commit many murders, and did do much slaughter among the people. And it came to pass that in the 94th year they began to increase in a great degree, because there were many dissenters of the Nephites, who did flee unto them, which did cause much sorrow unto those Nephites who did remain in the land. And there was also a cause of much sorrow among the Lamanites, for behold, they had many children who did grow up, and began to wax strong in years, that they became for themselves, and were led away by some who were Zoramites by their lyings and their flattering words to join the Gadianton Robbers. And thus were the Lamanites afflicted also, and began to decrease as to their faith and righteousness, because of the wickedness of the rising generation. Now remember, it said that after the sign was given that most of the Nephites were converted. And that was in the 92nd year. We're now in the 94th year. So this is only 2 years later. But when it says most of the Nephites were converted, that doesn't include the Gadianton Robbers. Right now, in this time period of the Nephite history, we have 3 main groups of people. There's the Nephites, and then there's the Lamanites, which are standard. But then we have the Gadianton Robbers, who infest the mountains and the wilderness. So when it records that all these people fell from fear and most were converted, it's talking about the Nephites. Also talking about the Lamanites, because at this point the record of the two are kind of coming together. But this isn't a record of the Gadianton Robbers. The Gadianton Robbers, just as the Lamanites were before, earlier in the record, from the time of 2nd Nephi down to Alma, there was no record of what was going on among the Lamanites, because the Lamanites didn't keep records. The Gadianton Robbers aren't keeping records either. And so now we have a time where the Lamanites and Nephites are both keeping records, but the Gadianton Robbers aren't. And so when it says that they were all converted, we're not talking about the Gadianton Robbers. They weren't converted. At least, not many of them were. There were enough of them left that they still had great power, and they were still raiding and pillaging and killing and all this stuff. And within 2 years, we have people from both the Nephites and the Lamanites are again going off to join the Gadianton Robbers. And because so many of the younger generation, these are people, late teens, maybe early 20s, running off to join the Gadianton Robbers, and it's starting to affect the faith of the Lamanites, who up to this point, from the time that Nephi and Lehi went and preached to the Lamanites up to this point, the Lamanites were the strongest in their faith. But now even the Lamanites are starting to waver a little bit. But this is just shortly after Joseph fled into Egypt, because this is in the 94th year, which is about 3 years after Christ's birth. So right now, Joseph and Mary and Christ are all living in Egypt, and Herod is still king in Jerusalem. Well, I'm going to leave that here, and we will continue this in chapter 2 next, so I will see you there.